Ever pondered if man is a puppet in the hands of a divine puppeteer, or if he's the master of his own fate? This question, my friends, has been the source of endless debates and countless sleepless nights for scholars, philosophers, and theologians alike. Today we're going to delve into this intriguing paradox, exploring the nature of man through the lens of the Bible. Is man a determined creature set on a path drawn by a divine hand? Or is he a free creature, gifted with the power to shape his own destiny? For centuries, the Bible has served as a beacon of wisdom and guidance, illuminating the paths of those who seek answers. And yet, when it comes to the question of man's nature, the good book seems to offer evidence supporting both perspectives. On one hand, we find passages suggesting that every step we take, every decision we make, is part of a grand, divine design. This would imply that man is indeed a determined creature, his fate already etched in the annals of time by the hand of the Almighty. On the other hand, there are verses that speak of free will, of choices and consequences, of rewards and punishments. These passages seem to suggest that man, while living under the watchful eye of the Creator, is granted the freedom to chart his own course. This dichotomy, this tension between determinism and free will, is what makes the nature of man such a fascinating topic. It invites us into a world of paradoxes and contradictions, a world where things are not always as they seem, a world that challenges us to think, to question, to seek, and to understand. So, are we puppets or are we masters? Are we bound by destiny or are we free to forge our own paths? The answers to these questions are not easy, nor are they clear-cut. But fear not, for we are about to embark on a journey that will take us deep into the heart of Scripture. So let's dive into the depths of Scripture and see if we can find clarity on this matter. Now, let's look at the case for determinism. Some biblical passages seem to suggest that God has a plan for everyone. Consider the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This passage is often interpreted as evidence that God has a predestined blueprint for each person's life. Here, the Lord asserts he has specific plans for us, plans to prosper us and give us a future filled with hope. This suggests that our lives are not random, but rather orchestrated by a divine plan. Let's also look at Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. The verse goes, "In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will." Now, this verse is even more explicit. It speaks of us being chosen and predestined according to God's plan. This language strongly implies determinism. It suggests that God has not only a plan for us, but that he also actively works to shape our lives according to his will. These verses, among others, could be seen as providing a strong case for the view that man's actions and life path are determined by God. The language of plans, predestination, chosen, all point towards a divine script that each person is living out. However, it's important to remember that the Bible is a complex text, filled with metaphor, allegory, and multiple layers of meaning. These passages could also be interpreted in other ways. For instance, they might be seen as expressing God's overarching plans for humanity as a whole, rather than for each individual. From these passages, it seems like God has a predetermined plan for everyone. But is that the whole story? On the other side of the coin, there are passages that seem to indicate that man has free will. Let's delve into some of these passages and see what they reveal. One of the most well-known passages that seem to support the notion of free will is Deuteronomy 30:19. Here we find Moses speaking to the Israelites, presenting them with a choice between life and death, blessing and curse. He implores them to choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. The language used here, the command to choose, suggests that the Israelites had the freedom to make this decision for themselves. Another passage that seems to indicate free will is Joshua 24:15. Joshua, leading the Israelites after Moses, presents a similar choice. He says, "And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve." Again, the power of choice is given to the people. They aren't being forced into servitude, but rather they're being asked to make a conscious decision about whom they will serve. These passages paint a picture of humans as beings with the ability to make choices. We see individuals being presented with options, and the responsibility of choosing is placed squarely on their shoulders. The language used, the command to choose, is strong and direct, suggesting that the decision is theirs to make. But it's important to remember that interpretation plays a large role in how we understand these passages. Some may argue that these choices are not indicative of free will, but rather of God's commandments that must be obeyed. Others might say that the very fact that a choice is presented is proof of free will. These passages seem to suggest that man has the freedom to choose. So where does this leave us? So, is man a determined creature or a free creature? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the middle. This brings us to the intriguing possibility that the Bible, in its infinite wisdom, may actually support both determinism and free will. This might seem paradoxical, but let's delve a little deeper into this idea. Imagine a grand tapestry, woven with countless threads, each representing a human life. Now picture God as the master weaver, with a grand design in mind. This is the concept of determinism, the belief that God has a specific plan for everyone, an overarching design that guides the course of the universe. But what if within this grand design, within the bounds of this tapestry, each thread has the freedom to weave its own pattern, to choose its own path? This is where the concept of free will comes into play. The Bible, in many instances, seems to suggest this delicate balance. Take, for instance, the words of Paul in his letter to the Philippians. He says, "Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure." Here we see an invitation to action, a call to make choices, to work out our own salvation. Yet at the same time, it acknowledges that it is God who works within us. So, while determinism suggests that our lives are part of a grand divine plan, free will implies that we have the agency to make choices within that plan. It's like being given a piece of music to play. The notes, the rhythm, the tempo, they're all predetermined. But how we interpret that music, the emotion and nuance we bring to our performance, that's up to us. This balance, this interplay between determinism and free will, might just be the key to understanding the nature of man according to the Bible. It suggests that while we are part of a divine plan, we are not mere puppets on a string. We are active participants in our own lives, free to make choices, free to weave our own patterns within the grand tapestry of life. So, perhaps the Bible suggests a delicate balance between determinism and free will. So, what can we conclude about the nature of man according to the Bible? Throughout our examination, we've tread upon the fertile ground of interpretation, seeking understanding in the complex tapestry woven by determinism and free will within the biblical narrative. The Bible, in its infinite wisdom and depth, appears to offer evidence for both perspectives, painting a picture of man that is both determined and free, bound by destiny, yet entrusted with choice. From the viewpoint of determinism, we see a sovereign God, the master architect who has set the universe in motion, from the grandest galaxies to the tiniest subatomic particles. Every event, every circumstance, every human action is part of his divine plan. Like a skilled potter, he molds and shapes us according to his will, guiding us in paths predestined before the dawn of time. Yet, nestled within this deterministic framework, we find the vibrant thread of free will. The Bible abounds with instances of choices, decisions, and actions that individuals must undertake. It presents a God who, despite his sovereignty, values our autonomy, entrusts us with moral responsibility, and invites us to participate in the unfolding of his divine narrative. So we find ourselves at an intersection, where determinism and free will are not opposing forces, but rather complementary aspects of the human experience. Like two sides of the same coin, they coexist in harmony, each providing a unique lens through which to view our existence. In this light, the Bible seems to suggest a delicate balance, a dance, if you will, between destiny and choice. It invites us to embrace both our inherent freedom and our divinely orchestrated destiny. We are both the clay in the potter's hands and the potter at the wheel, both the created and the co-creator in the grand scheme of existence. In the end, perhaps the question isn't whether man is a determined creature or a free creature, but how he navigates the intricate dance between destiny and choice.